Frank Yang.
Yes,
He
nice
is
to
our
meet you.
guest today, and I hope I pronounced your name right because sometimes it's
Uh,
so. Frank, welcome to this channel. I mean, I'm so honored and privileged to have you on board.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I never got an interview by. I guess I've been interviewed by people outside of the state, sure, but not someone in your position because I think I also saw that you're a doctor and you're a basketball coach and all a bunch of different things.
I know because all those titles are given in my email because I use it for my official work.
Ah,
And but this is my passion.
yeah,
It has
same.
nothing
Yeah.
to do with what I do as a professional lecturer.
Mm,
Now, Frank, I mean, you live in Maryland, but right now you are somewhere else.
yep.
Uh, and but that's all right. But you are from USA,
Yep.
and we are happy to have you on board. And we will start with the question straight away. Uh, Let me give you a small kind of background as to what we are expecting from you.
Sure.
Now, Sri Lankans are primarily Buddhist and they are Theravada Buddhists.
Mm,
I
yeah.
won't go into details, but in the last 10 years or so, they have come up with the the discourses that Lord Buddha has spelled out that are more spiritual than mundane teachings. And then they are beginning to realize there are other speakers, whether they are from non-dual field or whether they are from individual fields, they are speaking the same thing.
Hmm.
So I believe this discussion will help because I have watched some of your videos and I found that your versions are very, very prac pragmatic and the
Mm,
people can actually turn attention to themselves and ask themselves the question, who am I and what I am? So
hmm.
here is the first question. Um, Basically, if we take a step back, Frank, our experience derives from what you see, what you hear, what you think, and what you feel. Yeah. And these are the basic experience. Whatever that emanates from that, whether it's your life story or your biodata or your position or your designation, these are all additions. Right?
Mm,
But those basics, you can always go back and come to that basics and probably start practicing.
yeah.
And I heard you were saying about how the thoughts, one thought is followed by another and followed by another, followed by another. So, and people are here are of the opinion that we should be conscious of everything that's happening in and around us, like seeing, hearing, touch, all that. Or should we be contemplating more on the thoughts that are generating? We don't know where they are coming from, and we can't stop them from coming
Yeah.
in. So should we be paying more attention to the thoughts because that's the biggest challenge,
Right.
than taking the whole experience as one and
Mm,
then seeing it as one?
yeah.
I will give
Mm,
you the stage from there.
yeah. I think ultimately thoughts are just sensations too, right? We have the aggregates and the sense stores. So thoughts, feelings, sight, sound, whatever the case is, it's actually you can I guess you can reduce them down to sensations, but ultimately the sensations are also empty and they're not apart from the nature of mind, from the ground, groundless ground, the unconditioned. So it depends on the person's disposition or their background, what they prefer, their incarnational talent or lack of talent, whatever the case may be. So there are different ways to go about it, right? Some traditions like Dzogchen, even though they do a lot of like preliminary practices, eventually the path is the fruit, right? It's like you just recognize the nature of mind and then you recognize it again and then again and again. You be pointed out to the nature of mind and you recognize it again and again and again. But then for I guess Theravadins, at least the way I did Vipassana, which is grounded in Theravada tradition, we don't go into the nature of mind at least not yet, at least not the first retreat that we go to. We just focus on maybe the nature of the conditions themselves, like, seeing the impermanence of sensations coming and going, seeing that there is no self apart from this flow, and that the body sensations, the impermanence of it, and then see that there is no permanent or solidified entity in the midst of those sensations. But even that is just an expedient means of recognizing the unconditioned ultimately, because even impermanence is not an ultimate insight, right? Because like the reason why there is impermanence is because you still have a reference point, say the observer that's observing what's impermanent. So then you go a little deeper. Sure, that's an insight, but it's not a realization. You go a little deeper, you say, oh, the observer is actually just part of the flow too. So the subject object collapse. So what's permanently observing the impermanence, what's being observed, and the observer, they collapse onto themselves, onto each other. They cancel each other out. So you go beyond even that duality between permanence and impermanence, and you enter this unconditional flow where it doesn't matter if you're flowing or not flowing, right? It's the unconditioned, which is beyond coming and going, the nature of mind, which is again, it's not apart from the sensations, it's not apart from the flowing of sensations and the conditionalities and the aggregates, but also at the same time, no conditionalities and no aggregates can touch it. So it depends on your routing.
And can I interrupt you now? I mean, let's take a very grassroots thing. A thought comes in, and then it stirs a sensation. These are very, very, you know, I may be using a very primitive language, but
Oh
just
yeah,
to try to, a
totally.
thought comes in, it stirs the
Yeah.
sensation, then it leads to a feeling,
Yeah.
and it will, and then you pursue something,
Hmm.
and then it will, or it may or may not be leading to an action.
Right, right. Yeah.
So now let's take
Mm.
uh, a thought uh, that is connected to hate. It's a hateful thought. And then it comes and it arouses here. And then, okay, I don't want to see that guy anymore in my
Hmm.
life. He has done things like that. Why I'm asking you is, if you isolate a thought which comes and creates the sensation, and at one point, do you arrest that? Now, you can't stop it from coming because it will come anyway. But then
Yeah.
all these things are happening thereafter.
Yeah.
As a practitioner, where do you catch
No.
the fellow?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, the reason why we focus so much on thoughts is because as modern humans, we're constantly ruminating, right? Like our society requires us to constantly think thoughts, right? So that's the reason why thoughts are special in a lot of the spiritual practices. But again, like I said earlier, thoughts are not really special, right? They're just sensations too. But then you can really fall into the trap of reifying the state of no self if you at the same time putting the thoughts in a pedestal while simultaneously trying to get rid of it. So you can really reify thoughts that way. By trying to get rid of thoughts, you're actually reifying it. So the state of having no thoughts is just a temporary state, right? It's not the ultimate truth. But then we need that as an anchor or a ground in order to further progress our spiritual path because most of us are bombarded with thoughts all the time. We don't have the stillness to even recognize deeper insights like the nature of compounding phenomena. It's exactly what you just said, how thoughts lead to feelings, then it leads to like actions and the way you react, well, that precedes the action, and then your actions and habitual tendencies and the becomings and all that stuff, which then loops back to create uh the thought patterns in the ongoing loop of catch 22, right? That's the cycle of samsara, like the 12 links of dependent origination, if you want to break it down like that. So we cannot even be able to see those or recognize these patterns unless our minds are collected and at least to a point where it's you don't have to be completely silent, but at least still enough to be able to recognize these patterns at a subtle and subtle level. Yeah, yeah. So at what
Let me
point
let me
does
let me let me tell you my own experience.
yeah, sure.
Now, I don't know. Now, if I am able to observe, but I don't know what you call the observe, maybe consciousness, maybe,
Mm,
uh, if you are able to observe when a thought arises, and the moment when a thought is being watched, you can see it disappears because probably it doesn't get food or something. But
Yeah,
this is
yeah, of
something that you can practice. I mean, you can, yeah,
course. Yeah.
but the point is, it doesn't solve the problem
It doesn't
because
solve the
it keeps
problem.
coming.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. It's a temporary ground, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of times we mistaking the remedy or the method for truth, or we mistaking the means for an end. So you see a lot of like radical non-dual circles out there. They would say something like thoughts are just bad, or like concepts are just bad. Like the ultimate state is to be in a state with no thoughts. So they're kind of
Mm,
they're trying to explain it away, right? They're mistaking the method or the temporary remedy for the ultimate state, which, like you said, it's not possible to have no thoughts, right? Thoughts just come in, just like the way birds fly, right? The birds chirp
yeah.
and the clouds pass by. It doesn't matter. Like once you recognize the nature of thoughts or the nature of phenomenons, it doesn't matter if you have thoughts or not. You can actually think without thoughts. You can actually
Mm,
have a million thoughts and still not be disturbed because there's no thinker. That's you realize the thinker is just another thought, which also simultaneously gives you more flexibility to utilize concepts or to generate thoughts in a way that's useful and pragmatic. So thoughts are not the enemy,
when
right?
you said uh, the thoughts are not permanent, and the nature of thought is such that it comes and goes,
Yeah,
and then you also need the thoughts because your day to day whatever you do,
absolutely. Yeah,
and then to say that there is no thinker, I think you said something similar to that.
yeah. I said
So
the thinker is just
should
another thought, right?
shouldn't we have that understanding first, whether you hear it from a friend or a philosopher or a speaker like you? uh, there is no thinker, but the thoughts come. The thinker is also a thought.
Yeah.
Isn't that a good position, to start this journey?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, you can tell someone there's no thinker, but they don't even have the stability of the mind to see that insight. So we sure you can inseminate their mind with this insight at the intellectual level and then allow them to do investigations, allow them to, slowly let that insight seep in. But that might presuppose some kind of a preliminary practice, like watching your thoughts from the position of an observer, and then see that the observer is actually just another thought or just another cluster of sensation that is not ultimately doing the observation, right? We're just pretending to look at a thought from the perspective of an observer. But actually, that's not what's happening, right? Because every sensation is actually aware of themselves. Every sensation is sensing themselves exactly where they are. It doesn't take an observer
So,
or a reference point or
so
the apprehender
in,
to.
yeah, in your own experience, you may have somehow got into this
Mm,
inquiry at some point of time, and then you have had you may have gone into several aspects of this, and I mean, and also you are a multifaceted, versatile personality from a mm, violinist to bodybuilding to all that. I mean, all these things may have sort of conditioned you to go into an investigation. Hey, what's happening?
yeah, yeah, I think so.
And I know, but if you at least tell us how you managed and what you arrived at, although,
Mm,
come on, and like the non-dual speakers are saying that there's no person in the body or something.
mm, mm.
If you can at least give us a clue as to how your journey began and then where you sort of, okay, made this discovery. That's it.
Oh, oh, good question. Oh, hold on, let me. Sorry. My journey. Well, I think my journey with spirituality or meditation started even. Well, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where it started. Like you say, even when I started playing the violin at the age of 5, when I started making art, like even before I could speak, in a sense, my journey already started. Right. In a sense, my journey started the moment that I was incarnated. Right. But then at the more like conventional level, um, I think my journey started when I was around maybe like 27, 28. That's when I started to meditate, like formally sit. Like before that, for a few years, I was experimenting with psychedelics, and before that, philosophy. But then that
Mm,
was just an ongoing trajectory. of this whole life, this whole path. I see no distinction between the path and life and mind, right? But then if you want to pin it down, so it's like, where exactly did you start your spiritual journey? And from the perspective of a narrative, I can say that it started when I was like around like 27. Yeah. And I started doing TM, like transcendental meditation. And after that, I did my first Vipassana retreat. And then after my first Vipassana retreat, I just got really serious with meditation. I was sitting up to like 2 hours a day minimum for the next few years, maybe the next like 5 years. Yeah. And then I went on my second Vipassana retreat when I was around 33, I believe. And that was when I just experienced all the jhanas and had my first like cessation, I guess you can call it that. But that was before I even read about anything like that. When you go to a Goenka retreat, they don't really teach you the nuances of jhanas and or like mystical experiences or even cessations. At least not the first like initial retreat. But then I had to discover that I learned all that myself after having these experiences. After my second retreat, I went online and just did some research, and I discovered that there's a lot of people online. Oh, well, back then there wasn't a lot of people yet, but there were still communities of people talking about these kind of jhanic states, absorptions, and things like that on the internet. That's when I discovered the pragmatic Dharma circle. Guys like
mm,
Daniel Ingram or like Kenneth Folk or like Shijin Yang, Chuladosa, people like that. And then I venture out to the more radical non-dualist because of the internet,
mm.
right? One video leads to another. And I
Yeah,
discovered like Adi
mhm,
Ashanti,
that's
Rupert
true.
Spiral, and like I see in the
Mm,
beginning, who is that non-dual teacher that you said? Tony Parson. I never really
very
resonated.
possible.
Yeah, I never resonated too much with the very extreme radical non-dualists. There's something just off about it. I don't know. Maybe because of my background in Vipassana, I always practice, right? But for them, it's like, yeah, you don't need to practice. There's nobody here to practice. I mean, like I said, like ultimately that's not wrong, right? But then a lot of the non-dual
Yeah.
teachers, the radical ones, they have a point, but then the problem is that they will explain everything away through the ultimate, through the lens of the ultimate.
Mm,
But then
yeah.
if you haven't bridged the gap between the relative and the
Mm,
ultimate, then you can't take that in. You can't understand that insight at all. You can only understand it through your own self view, through your own
mm,
relative lens. And that's why a lot of people that just bypass and they just um suppress, bypass, whatever the case is, and they just got a bunch of people watching non-dual videos and it's like, oh, there's nothing to do here. But then they're still suffering. They just like use that as a mantra to like look cool or like to
mm,
almost like feeding onto their identity. It's like, oh yeah, there's no identity here. There's no one here. But then who's saying that? Do you actually
mm,
realize
mm,
ultimately? Do you actually like recognize that, realize that at the experiential level, at the embodied level? If you do, you wouldn't be saying
mm,
that because you know that the inside is much deeper than that. That the inside is
mm,
beyond all extremes, beyond all dualities. So like no self is actually just another extreme. Self and no self is an extreme. Both extremes, right?
mm.
The nature of mind is beyond all extremes, right?
Yeah.
Doership, non-doership, there's nothing to do. The gradual path versus like the sun path, all those dualities eventually collapse.
There is this radical non-dual version is that there is no one here,
Yeah,
no self. There's no one doing this. This is what is happening.
yeah,
And they go to the extent of saying this is what is,
yeah,
not
yeah,
even what it is. They say this is what is, that is it.
yeah, yeah,
However, the ones who are advocating like Rupert Spira or even Muji for that matter, they speak about oneness,
yeah.
interconnectedness. Now that interconnectedness somehow resonates with a lot of people because you can justify that even with logic. You know,
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
one can't be here without the other.
yeah,
Everything is linked.
yeah.
And in that you can't find what is right, what is wrong, because that's what is.
Yeah.
So would you favor more this oneness concept than this no self? Yeah, I'm trying to get something out of you,
Oh, I
you know.
see. Okay, yeah, I think the oneness thing and the no self thing, that can all be extreme views, right? Well, ultimately, you want to go beyond the one, the many, but
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
embody both. You can be the oneness. You can use the oneness lens if you want, but then you have to
Mm,
recognize that's how your mind is aggregating. You can do the self lens if the moment calls for it, sure. But then you see that there's the difference is that do you recognize that neither of these views has an inherent existence, because like people mistaking the lack of inherent existence with non-existence. Just because something doesn't exist inherently doesn't mean that it ultimately doesn't exist because non-existence is also an extreme view. So you can say this is the middle way path, but again, the middle way isn't really a point between two extremes because once you see through the both sides of the extreme, the middle view also collapses. So the middle way is actually that which is transcending both sides of the duality, both sides of the extremes, while has the capacity to incorporate and embody both sides of the extreme. So I can say the oneness is not a wrong view, right? It's just a partial view. And same with like even like interconnectedness. I think I resonate a little bit more with the interconnectedness view, like dependent origination. You know, without this, there won't be that, right? If
Yeah,
this arises, that arises. If this seizes, that seizes. So
yeah.
that's a really good, useful lens to see through a lot of extremes, right? So you don't actually have to annihilate the self or annihilate the subject. You see that the subject co-arising with the object. That's just the nature of phenomenons, how everything's codependent arising. You don't really actually have to get rid of the self. You see that the self arise, codependent arise with the object, with the others, and you see how compounded phenomena and uncompounded phenomena both lack inherent existence. Which
Mm,
is why which is precisely the reason why anything arises at all, right? The only reason why there is form, which is always interpenetrated. The only reason why there is form is because of relationships,
mm,
and
mm,
the only reason why there can be a relationship is because there's no size that has inherent existence. Like me and you right now, we can't manifest each other this way, have a relationship, have a dialogue, unless we are both empty of inherent existence ourselves.
Frank, now there is something else that is emerging
Hmm.
from Sri Lanka. Now, you see, as I said before, primarily mm, almost all of them are Buddhists and they have been traditional Buddhists. And now, when they go into some of these teachings like dependent origination and Satipatthana and Four Noble Truths and all that, there is another version coming up that
Oh,
it's a
interesting.
moment to moment,
Moment to moment.
moment to moment,
Hmm.
moment to moment
Oh,
appearance.
okay. Yeah, yeah. I understand that. Yeah.
And that is kind of, it's like someone was giving this example that you have a projector behind.
Right, right.
You are a filmmaker, so you will understand this
Yeah,
much
yeah, yeah, yeah.
better.
It's like one frame after another, one frame after another.
Like
Moment to
the
moment to moment to
projector,
moment to moment. Yeah.
yeah, and then it flashes, and the projector flashes this,
Mm.
including yourself. So you
Including
are
yourself,
part of
sure.
the
Yeah.
actor,
You're just part of the
which means
projection. Yeah.
exactly. So everything is a projection, and it's a moment-to-moment thing. Now this is sort of like stemming up gradually, and people tend to find, hey, there's something that also did Buddha say something like that? So
Sure.
this is still being heavily experimented now among the
Mm.
stringent spiritual seekers.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure you have something to say on that point, this moment to moment projection of the
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, again, it's not ultimately wrong to say that, but you have to transcend even that, right? Because the reason why you're experiencing a moment after another moment is because you're still compounding time. You're still compressing the timeless into moments by moments by moments. So there is still a sense of linearity, which is again, it's
Yeah,
not apart from this mandala, which transcends linear cause and effect and linear time. But the timeless includes all three times. So it's not like it's wrong to say there is moment to moment to moment. But once you get stuck in the moment to moment to moment to moment, then you still
there's
fixated on
a,
a particular kind of view.
yeah,
Yeah, because
mm,
you can still suffer when you experience yourself to be an impermanent self that
mm,
transmute or transform moment to moment to moment to moment. It's a very subtle. I mean, sure, you can have that insight and eradicate a lot of your suffering, but then it's not quite liberation yet. Same thing with the view that everything is a projection. So that's kind of like the view over how everything is mine, which again is not ultimately wrong, right? Everything is mine, but then you have to go even beyond that because you realize that at first you think that there's a physical reality, and then you start doing spiritual practice, and you start to realize, oh, everything is just mine, it's just a projection, and then
mm,
you realize everything is mine, and then you see that there
mm,
is no mine because this everything minus is also empty of inherent existence. The
mm,
the danger of experiencing everything as mine is that you can fall into the view of solipsism or idealism.
mm, mm.
Yeah, just little
Exactly.
traps that people just aren't aware of because nobody pointed out to them because it's so subtle, right? Like I wasn't aware of this myself when I was going through these phases.
Yeah, because when you say everything is mind driven,
Yeah,
and no
you're
one is
there's a
doing.
chance. Yeah, yeah. That there is a danger in verifying that everything is minus into some kind of a substantiality. That there's a still a substrate that you can pin on and say, "Oh, this is the nature of reality. It's mine." And that nature of reality that we verify and substantialize could be everything is mine, or everything is consciousness, or everything is physical reality, everything is matter, or everything is impermanent, or even everything is empty. All those are
Mhm.
very subtle views that you continuously refine and transcend. And then, of course, the ultimate view of no view, say the viewless view, can incorporate all these different extreme partial views. But you have to be able to recognize that to flexibly aggregate from one
Mm.
view to another. So you're not
So
rejecting,
you mean,
annihilating, or negating anything, right? Yeah.
I know, but you mean to say the language is not strong enough to describe the reality, or is that what you are suggesting? Because ultimately you have to say this in language.
Yeah, ultimately you cannot describe this in language, sure. Yeah, but what I'm describing is yeah, sure. Yeah, ultimately the language cannot really wrap itself around the ultimate truth, right? But I'm also saying that people just don't have the fitness or the luminosity or the I guess the clarity to be able to see how reality is constructed and how their views are constructed. They just don't have enough fitness or enough recognition.
I'll,
Then that just takes
I'll answer
practice.
you. Yeah, I know. I'll answer you this question. The question may look a little bit stupid, but it doesn't matter because now you said the time factor,
The
because
time
every
factor.
time you bring in the time, you are making a linear,
Yeah.
kind of a. Now, I will give you a very crude example as to how the time is ascertained by people. Okay, you go before a mirror and you look at yourself. Then you go before the mirror after 5 years or this thing. You definitely know you have changed.
Mm.
And that change is attributed to the age,
Yeah.
Okay, now, although you don't speak about the time, that change that
It's
you are
still
trying to
happening.
explain is attributed to time.
Yeah.
That's why. Now, if you use that projection theory, this is being projected. Well, one can say, well, whoever is projecting this is also using this time factor to establish the time. Whoever is
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's an
Now,
infinite loop.
okay, all right. Can you explain that?
Well, I don't think you should negate time, right? Because time still exists on
Yeah,
one level, right? Because a lot of going back to the non-dual view, right? A lot of radical non-dualists, they will just negate time altogether. Say, oh, there's no time, there's
yeah,
no becoming. They don't talk
yeah,
about karmas because karma cannot
yeah.
exist, at least the trajectory of karmas, the way you're conditioned to become, cannot exist without time. It is time. So if you
Mm,
negate that and just bypass it, then you can
mm,
really negate a big part of your development in terms of like how exactly are moments forms, how exactly are karmas form, right?
mm.
That's something that you can actually understand non-conceptually, experientially. That's why I see a lot of non-dual people. They might be abiding in spaciousness or like awareness, whatever you want to call it, but then they still complain about how there's still very subtle conditionings and traumas
Yeah, yeah.
and shadows that just always seem to be there, regardless of how much I sit and just let the things come up, right? Because they're not
Mm,
understanding at the subtle level karmic trajectories and conditioned becomings and exactly how phenomena compound, which then creates a volition, what the Buddhists call volitional formations. It's the second link of the dependent origination process. They don't understand that. So they would just say, oh, there's no time. And they just cut off that particular aspect of the development. Because I think Shi Yang said it really nicely. He said enlightenment is a multifaceted jewel. It's not just
mm.
like one insight or like one realization. It's almost like, sure, you can say there's just one realization, but that realization can be looked at in so many different angles. And you can look at it from this way, you can look at the jewel from that way, you can look at it develop from this way, you can, continuously develop this way or that way, whatever the case is, right? So you want to be flexible. Yeah. The moment you cut off
Frank,
time,
now,
yeah, you stop trying to understand karmas, and then that's why you still complain about how you still get intrigued by the same thing that's been triggering you since like 10 years ago, even though you have this access to like this vast, infinite, boundless awareness. But then, you still get triggered here and there. Why is that?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, this is my point. Now, the karmic machinery, of
Mm,
course, it's described in Abhidhamma and in deep philosophies, and some people
right.
study these. But of course, the karma machinery deals with, things like uh, in Pali you call it chittakshana. Now,
Mm,
chittakshana is so many like 100,000 times of a second. So a human can't even comprehend that.
mm,
How fast things move. So
right, right,
which
right.
means then there is a justification as to why certain things happen in a certain way.
Mm.
And
Sure, you can always explain it away. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I know. So if you sort of try to bring in all these aspects, all right, or let's forget, because as a person who is seeking, all the people are seeking a way out of suffering,
Yep.
and that is the bottom line. You know, if inside I have peace, I couldn't care whether I'm young or old, or I couldn't give a damn about it. I have peace here. Now, that's what most people are looking
Right.
for through this spiritual thing, whether it's meditation or studies or discussions or whatever. So
Mm.
that's the bottom line. So, where do they start with, or what kind of a path they should be treading on, and what areas that they should be looking at, and kind of how do they do their analyses? Should they be looking at themselves, thoughts, feelings, or I mean, how do they begin this exercise?
Yeah, it all depends, right? That's why I think the reason why most people aren't making progress in the modern world is because they just jump from teaching to teaching to teaching. They don't stick with
Mm.
a specific path or specific practice until it starts working. So they'll just jump from this teacher to that teacher because the internet is so vast, right? You can easily just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, okay, this is this way, that way. This teacher says that, that teacher has this view, that view. So they're not getting to the root of it, right? They're not understanding the how this path is fundamentally, how the nature phenomena is fundamentally. They're still looking at the things at the very surface level in terms of like techniques, methods. If I do this, I should get that. Oh, if Frank says if you do Vipassana, then I should do Vipassana. Therefore, I will get whatever Frank is experiencing. But those are all conditioned. Yeah, yeah. You want to be able to look deeper than that and see how each practice applies to your own particular disposition or talent or lack of talent or whatever the case may be, right? It's different for everyone. And then you get to decide what path you want to follow, or if you want to follow the pathless path, sure. Like what makes a path pathless? You have to really
Mm.
examine the ontological structure around these practices. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning in circles. And that also ties back in what I was saying about the view, right? You're still operating this from the self view in a sense. You're not investigating the container that holds up your entire spiritual pursuit. And if you see
Mm.
through that, then if you recognize the sort of the meaning making, the sense making, and the ontological structure, the view that holds up your way of being, which then dictates how you want to practice, if you like this kind of practice or that, then it gives you a more freedom to pick and choose whatever spiritual practice that is most beneficial to you right now in this moment because it changes, right? There's no like fastest way to enlightenment. There's no particular method that ultimately would work for you. Maybe there can be in this particular phase of your journey, but then what you want to do is continuously self-invalidate whatever progress that you're making, whatever you think is the best method right now. Sure, you can make some progress, but then you have to be eventually let go of both the stains and the detergent. Because from the perspective of a clean shirt, both the stain and the detergent are obscurations. So it's a continuous, ongoing process of self-invalidation to reveal the nature of mind, which is a non-affirmative negation. It's not a particular thing that you can even obtain.
Frank, did you say
It,
self validation or invalidation?
self-invalidation. Yeah, the spiritual journey can be boiled down to the continuous process of self-invalidation. So you can like, oh, have this method that works here and there, but ultimately they all have to be self-invalidated. You have to
Hmm.
question the intention and the purpose of each practice. What's the relationship between content and context, and then self-invalidate that whole container, and then move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. Even after a very deep realization, the exploration will continue. You can still explore
Now,
many different methods, but then now you just have
now we
a clarity of like exactly what you're doing. Yeah. Except most people don't do that, right?
no, we have situations like this. We have people, they say, "Oh, I have been going from one teacher to another, and then I ended up with this teacher, and
Yeah.
what he says resonates, and I'm very happy, and I'm there now." But then after 2 or 3 years, you see him following someone
Yeah.
else.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Then uh, there are also instances where someone might say, "Oh, out of all the speakers, this is the best." So I used
Mm,
to ask them, "Okay, so have you accomplished, or I mean, are you still seeking, or have you
mm,
achieved something, or like in Buddhism, is it some kind of a title like Sotapanna, or and they say, "No,
mm.
no, 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 but I feel that he's there." I said, "There is something wrong now. You say you feel that he's telling the right thing, but you say you haven't got anything out of this. So there's a disjoint.
Yeah.
Um, what would you advise? It's yeah, okay. Going from teacher to teacher is fine. At least you are not
Yeah, sure, sure.
hooked up
Yeah.
with something. Yeah. But is there a way that they have to sort of check inside always? How does it resonate in me?
Yeah, sure. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, it's not really about the teacher, right? Yeah. Yeah. It's about how your relationship to the teaching. Like, is it working for you in this particular phase or under this particular context? Yeah. I don't know what my advice would be actually, because throughout my path, I've just been exploring a lot, right? And jumping from one
Mm,
teaching, but whatever methods I was using, for some reason, it just always worked for me. I don't
really?
know why that is. Yeah.
No, because some are very good. They're very eloquent
Oh,
speakers.
right,
So
right.
you fall for it.
No, I
But
know.
that's
Yeah. Okay.
very
Yeah. People
emotional.
do fall for it. Yeah. Yeah. They do fall for it.
Yeah. Then you become very emotional, and at the same time, by following a particular method or a way or something, indirectly that is nurturing this person again, indirectly,
Mm.
without it is strengthening the self.
Oh, yeah. Strengthen the
When
spiritual seeker for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
If I
exactly.
follow this
So it's
teacher, I'll get that. Yeah. Yeah. The same thing with methods. Yeah.
so it's a trap either way.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the trap all over. So it's like treading on balancing on the rope or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah. I call that the Ouroboros, right? Like a snake eating its own tail. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever progress you make, if you don't see through that, how that the samsara is continuously reinforcing samsara, then even the progress you made is just more conditionings. But then it's not like you're trying to like dissolve all the conditionings too, because you can never out dissolve or outpace reality, right? That this conditioning getting generated, getting dissolved all the time. That's the nature of compounded phenomenons, right? It rises to cease, it rises to cease. Everything expand, contract simultaneously. Whatever the nature of compounded phenomena is that it compounds and decompouns, compound and decompouns. But then there is the unconditioned, which is beyond that. But then at the same time, you're the only way to recognize or realize the unconditioned is through with and as the conditions. That's where you have to, in our group, we say pay homage to your afflictions. You're not trying to get rid of anything. You're actually working through with and as your obscurations and your afflictions. And it is through your conditioning can you recognize the unconditioned. So you're not pushing anything away. You're actually just resting within your afflictions and then
There is a
do the
sense.
recognition from that resting point, which is not the same thing as peace, by the way, or like equanimity. When I say resting, is the fitness to be with whatever is arising. So you can actually rest as restlessness. You're not trying to generate any particular kind of state at all. You're not trying to generate a state of peace or equanimity, nor are you trying to generate some kind of a bliss, mystical states. At the same time, you're not avoiding or pushing away the darkness, the dark night of the soul, and things like that. Yeah. So I
Shall
think that's
I?
the
Shall
problem with
I?
most people. They just they're chasing after states, right? They do this practice in order to obtain some kind of ultimate state, but then they're not seeing how that ultimate state is being constructed, being aggregated. How that view of I must be within this God of mine or this mystical bliss or whatever. Why is the sense of self being imputed upon that? Why am I craving towards some kind of ultimate state? Like how does that phenomena, that sense of compounding, generated?
mm,
So we have to see the mechanism of that. So it's not about this or that state or this or that teacher or this or that teaching. They're just like I said in the beginning, they're just expedient means for you to use as a temporary ground or an anchor for you to do the recognition from. They're just tools. But ultimately, if you don't see the nature of compounding phenomena through the nature of mind, then you're missing the point, right? Because otherwise, you're just going to be continuously removing obscurations with more obscurations. You're trying to clean up
mm.
stains with more stains, which is never going to work because that's just the nature of phenomenon, nature of samsara. Yeah, yeah.
You say, for instance, now there's a Zen saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, something like that.
Yeah.
So even
I actually just heard
for
someone
some,
said that today. Well, I was taking a walk and I was listening to a talk, and then somebody said that.
okay.
Yeah.
So now, does it mean that eventually, after this rigmarole of all these, listening, taking part in this thing, meditation, all that, for someone to grasp, even the word using grasp maybe not
Yeah,
correct,
exactly. Yeah, even that word
Yeah,
grasping is problematic, right? Even letting go. Like, what does it mean to say you're letting go?
exactly,
People don't question
exactly.
that, right? They're just like, oh, this teacher said you have to let go and do nothing. Okay, I'm gonna let go. But what is the mechanism of letting go? Yeah.
Mm.
What is the mechanism of grasping?
This-
Yeah.
Yeah, this was my question. So eventually, if someone to say, "Oh, I have discovered now, my search is over," it's questionable because you don't
Mm.
know from which position you are saying it.
Exactly. 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 Good point. Yeah. It's ultimately it's about your relationship to these things, right? What is your relationship with grasping? What is your
Mm-hmm.
relationship with letting go, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they, like you said, they're not seeing the position in which they're taking when they say, "Oh, I'm letting go." Because if you're letting go, so that's the thing. It's like going back to examine your view, right? If you constantly trying to expand or let go of something, then you can be trapped in the view of eternalism. You
Mm-hmm.
continuously want to enter the God realm or the Godhead, and on the
Mm-hmm.
other side of that, you have the view of annihilation or nihilism.
Mm-hmm.
But they're actually two sides of the same coin, right? They're the two poles of the same self view, actually. The only reason why you want to let go or expand is because you're trying to avoid something or it presupposes some kind of a contraction that you're trying to let go of, for example. But then again, contraction is not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you try to annihilate the self, there's a lot of people who practice Vipassana, they'll have this mindset of, oh, I have to dissolve every last speck of the self, or I have to exhaust all my conditionings.
Mm-hmm.
But then they're just generating another knot to untie this knot over here. So whatever is trying to get rid of the self is just more self. There's more selfing. But again, the selfing is not the problem, right? It's your relationship to them and whether or not you can see how your views are generated.
So let me ask you this. Coming back to this question of the doer, the
The
one
doer.
who is the doer. Now, like the notion is that it's happening, and the doer thinks that you are contributing to what is happening.
Mm,
And the non doers usually say, well, that is not true. It's only a mind, this thing.
yeah.
The doer
Right.
has no role. What is happening is happening. If that is the case, for instance, if it is true, if it is understood, okay, that's happening. If I decide to do something, that is also what is happening. If
Mm,
you take that posture, or even okay, there's no one inside this body. Even if you take that posture, now this is my personal view. I have this. I may be wrong, but I have this idea that there has to be some inner transformation. I mean, it's not like suddenly someone walks slowly, speaks slowly, and then won't get angry. Not that.
mm.
It's a that every viewpoint is questionable. I
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
choose someone as good as some transformation. Do you subscribe to that, or do you just say that?
Yeah, that's
I know
another
it's
one,
another
right?
view.
Yeah, I like it with the word posture, right? Because when we talk about views, we're not just talking about concepts or intellectual views or worldview. We're talking about the entirety of your experience, how you might aggregate,
Yeah.
which is the entire reality, right? So we're talking about like this concavity that we call reality that we don't even see, this invisible dome, right?
Mm,
So posture is a really good way to describe it. But anyway, so the doership thing again, it's like, oh, sure, you can. The non-doership is a position in which you can utilize as a remedy to cure the quote unquote disease of overly doing. Or like if you have
mm,
too strong sense of a doer, or if
mm.
you're constantly trying to control reality, then you can use the non-doership posture or position to see through that. But then ultimately, again, you have to go beyond extremes. You have to go beyond even the extreme of doership versus non-doership. Yeah. So you can actually will without agency and think without thoughts and desire without craving. Because again, desire is not the problem, right? It's your relationship to it, whether or not you're reacting to it with, I like this, I don't like this, or neutral. That's what's creating the craving and the grasping and then the becoming, the habitual tendencies, right? The desire is just the force of life, right? Again, thoughts is not the problem, it's the grasping around thoughts or the the mistakenness of thoughts to have inherent existence or the fact that the thinker has an inherent existence as thinking thought. That is the thing that we're mistaken with. That needs to be seen through. The thoughts are not the problem. Same thing with doership and non-doership. None of these are problems, right? Yeah.
You said something which is very unique. Desire is not a problem, but the craving is.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's if you differentiate these two, then you are neither committing anything, nor are you, because the
Exactly.
craving
Neither
probably
nor. Yeah.
pulls you. Mhm,
Yeah. 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 That's the position. It's like, yeah, neither nor, both, whatever the case may be. But
mhm,
then you have to see that even that can be a view too. But that's we won't go there yet. But the thing about desire is that without desire, there won't be nature, right? Nature,
movement. There won't be
human,
a
yeah,
movement. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
The only reason why this moment exists at all is because of desire. You can say
Yeah.
that's the desire of the universe or desire with a capital D. It is the force of nature. The only reason why we're breathing, why we enjoy food, sure, it's not the problem to enjoy food, right? It's the identity you create around it. Do you recognize your pattern of identities and becomings? Yeah.
I
Same thing
think
with
I think
it's same thing with the whole thing about like whether or not you have agency or not, right? That the whole debate of like free will versus determinism. It's like you
mm,
you can actually sure there is no agent in the mind, sure, but there's
mm,
still a will. You can say that will is also connected to the desire. There is a will of the universe, right? That's the only reason why something appears is because that there is some kind of a will. Like you can visualize it in a sense that imagine if you take the entire universe and then you
mm,
take a time lapse out of it. Maybe you film it and then
mm,
you condense it into a work of art, like a time lapse, and put it in a museum. No sense of becoming.
mm,
Beautiful, right? Yeah. That and with that comes, desire and reproductive energy, the creative force of nature. All that's completely,
mm.
nature, right? All that is nature. That you're not trying to negate that. It's the resistance to that, the craving around that, that's creating the suffering. That's why the I think the Buddha distinguishes between first and second dart, right? The first dart is
Mm,
inevitable, right? It's just the raw sensations of life. It's the second dart that we throw on top of the first dart, the reaction, the craving, identities, the stories, the meaning making, that is the source of suffering. So pain and pleasure are all welcome and inevitable, but suffering is optional. That's like
mm,
Buddhist
mm,
101. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Same thing
mm.
with like, the sense of like will, right? You can actually have an intention and have a will without condensing it to an individual agent that's controlling everything.
Frank, would you mind repeating that the first thought and the second thought? Now that's a very important thing for my audience.
Oh yeah, the
If
second
you,
and the first start, right? The first start is just the raw contact, the raw sensations of life, right? I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with the 12 links of dependent origination.
of course, I
Yeah,
mean they
yeah. So
master.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the master
Mm,
that. So the you can break it down through that model and say that the first star is just a raw contact, right? That the contact is the fifth link. There's
mm,
constantly contact, right? You're constantly in contact with reality, like the
mm,
sensation, the raw feeling of the quality of sensations, the quality of sensations, the texture of sensations. It's constantly going on. That's the only reason why there is an experience is because of the constant contact. I don't even want to say with reality because there's no distinction there. There's no like a gap there. Is everything's gapless. So it's almost like contact is contacting itself. So that
mm,
contact, the raw contact, is the first start. But then once
mm.
that started to proliferate and started to compound, then that first start then gets the second start is then thrown on top of the first start, and that's where the fifth link, the contact becomes well, I forgot what the next link is. I think
Mm,
six sense spheres and then name and
mm.
form. I think that was before that. I'm not sure, but then the reason why they're suffering is not because of the contact in the first start, is because of the reactions.
Yeah, it's
Not being able to.
Pacha, Vedana,
Yeah,
Vedana
yeah.
Pacha,
Yeah, that's where the
Sanya,
selfing
yeah.
process begins. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Mm,
selfing process is a kind of a loop back on itself, right? It's almost like you're creating this, like same thing with the observer, right? The observer is almost like the second dart. Yeah, the one
mm,
of
mm,
that insight into the nature of a phenomena is that there is no separate observer, right? So the observer
mm.
is almost like that second dart. So the second dart can be manifested and interpreted in many different ways, not just the stories of meaning making, but even the sense of a separate observer is something like the second dart, which is something
So
that
if the
which is
second
the start
thought
of the,
is,
yeah, is the selfing, is where the selfing process begins. Is that looking back,
mm,
like that sense of yeah, the sense of like, oh, here's something I'm looking at, and then that's creating the split in consciousness into
mm.
like subject, object, observer, the observed.
But that is a very tricky thing. If the second thought is okay, the first thought, if the second thought is the observer, then it's a huge trap because
Yeah, exactly.
observer
Yeah, I know exactly what
when
you're
the
saying.
first yeah.
Yeah, because everything you do from that point, from the split, is still split, right? It's just continuously compound.
Mm,
So if your consciousness is already split, then you can like say practice vipassana or self inquiry. It's still, you just continuously doing the compounding and splitting and reinforcing that
mm.
split over and over. Yeah. So how do you get out of
Yeah,
that?
I think
That's the $1 million question. How do you get out of that?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, well, I suppose that is up to the person, the spiritual seeker. I mean, okay, here something you have in front of you.
Hmm.
You decide which path you are going to take.
Yeah, sure, sure. I think the most important thing is recognition. It's the splitting is not really the problem. The compounding is not the problem because life wouldn't be here without compounding, right? All this twisting
Mm,
is the reason why we
mm,
reincarnate, right? The lines of the trees, the rings on a tree, is a
mm.
manifestation of karmic compounding, the karmic trajectory,
Yeah,
right? The muscles, right? If you don't twist, there's no muscles. Tendons,
yeah.
bones, the way that tendons wrap around the bones. The beauty of
Mm,
existence is all twists. It's just like Ellen
mm,
Watts said there's no straight lines in the universe. There's only wiggly, no things. But then it's the
mm.
twisting on top of the twisting, the compounding on top of the compounding, the resistance on top of whatever is already happening that's creating the suffering. So I think the initial step is really just to recognize it. We don't even have to talk about like dissolving things or like letting go, because like we
Mm.
said earlier, all that can still, in a very subtle level, creates its own resistance and contractions and reinforcing some kind of a view. Yeah. So just to rest and recognize exactly what is going on is, I think, can
Mhm,
just take you all the way. But again,
mm.
the depth of your rest and the depth of your recognition is what distinguishes between somebody who is only practicing this path for like a month versus like an arahat or even beyond that, like a Buddha.
Great. Actually, Frank, I don't want to ask any more questions. The reason is now you brought it to a particular point where the audience can um, ponder
There's some kind of
into,
resolution.
yeah, there is a way out, but
Yeah, there is a way now.
it's there is a way out. So let I mean we are going to talk again. I mean I'm going to invite you further.
Yeah, sure.
And
Yeah,
also,
definitely.
I'm going to mention your website and your other links into this my description,
Right, right.
so that the audience can click onto those and study further in what you have been trying to communicate. Uh,
Thank you.
and Frank, I'm really grateful
I'm grateful
that
to be
you
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good
So
cliffhanger. We can do a second episode. We can start off where we left off, and yeah,
exactly,
it's like how
exactly.
do you recognize? You know, what should you recognize? You know, that how do you rest? You know, there's a whole host of things that we can talk about in terms of like your fitness, your realization fitness. How do you train for this? Yeah, because
Mm,
you do need to train, right? Just like everything else, just like mastering the violin and the piano.
mm.
That's why
Yeah.
people like all the masters and the like mappas and the lamas, they go to school. They have scholarly
Mm,
study. They meditate since they were like 4 years old. That's another non-dual
mm,
trap. It's like, oh, this realization thing somehow is different. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to practice. It's a trap.
I
Yeah,
know, I know.
yeah, I know. You know.
Well, Frank, so let's meet again. Once again, we were very grateful, and so is my audience. And we will speak to you again. And have a nice day. And I know it's I don't know what time it may be the afternoon, and
Time for
it's late
lunch.
here.
Time for
I
lunch.
know. Okay, great.
Well,
So
what time is it
Frank,
over there
thanks
in
again.
Sri Lanka? What time is it over there?
Well, oh well, I don't think you have been to Sri Lanka, have you? You
Huh?
haven't. You
I've
haven't
never
been
been
to
to
Sri
Sri
Lanka.
Lanka. No, no, no,
Yeah,
no,
I think
no.
you should because this is, of course, we were not in the radar for a long tourism radar, but now the tourism is picking up so
Mm.
fast, and this
I
is
know
one
there's
of
a
the
lot of
unique kind.
retreats. Yeah, I know a lot of people that there are a lot of teachers that I used to follow. They will go to Sri Lanka for like, retreats. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but apart from the retreats, this is one of the most beautiful
Mm,
countries. It's not because I'm living here, I'm saying it because the diversity
mm.
in compactness. You can move from one place to another from, say, 30 degrees to, say, 10 degrees within a matter of 2 hours, and then
Excellent.
you
Yeah.
name it, whether it's ancient cities or culture or wildlife or mountains, you name it, we have it, kind of. So that's why the numbers are now
Mm,
increasing because we had the economic kind of a economic issue after COVID. So
right.
as a result, the government had to start rectifying a lot of things, and now it's a tourism time. So if you get a chance, we will
Yeah. If I
assist
if I
you.
get, yeah, I'll come find you. We can do an in-person
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. Yeah. All right, Frank. So
Yeah, that
we'll
was
meet up
super
again.
fun. Yeah, that was really fun
Yeah.
because like not a lot of people ask the in-depth questions like that. So I'm grateful for you too.
All
Yeah.
right. Great. Okay.
Let's keep in
Thanks a
touch.
lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, same, same.